Sunday, the 10th of June, when Emil hoisted little Ida up the Flagstaff. There was to be a party in Cuthold on Sunday, the 10th of June. Many people were coming from Lerneberger and other places. For several days Emil's mother had been preparing food. "It's going to cost a lot," said Emil's father. "But then, I suppose parties do. We mustn't be too niggardly. Though perhaps you could make those meatballs just a tiny bit smaller." "I'm making them exactly right," said Emil's mother. "The right size and the right shape and the right brown colour." And so she did. And she prepared spare ribs of pork and calves' livers and salmagundy and apple pie and smoked eel and stews and puddings and 2 giant cheesecakes and a special kind of sausage that was so delicious that people willingly drove all the way from Vimmerby and Hultsfred just to be able to have some. Emil liked those sausages very much too. It was just the right kind of day for a party. The sun was shining, the lilacs and the apple trees were in bloom, the air was full of birdsong, and Cuthold itself was lovely as a dream, standing there on its hill. The garden paths were newly raked, the house was scoured in every corner, the food was all ready, nothing remained to be done. Oh yes, just one thing. "Oh, dear heavens, we've forgotten to put up the flag," said Emil's mother. Emil's father set off at full speed and ran down the Flagstaff, Emil and little Ida close behind him. They wanted to see the flag reach the top of the pole. "I think it's going to be a lovely, happy party today," said Emil's mother to Lena when they were alone in the kitchen. "Yes, but mightn't it be better to lock up Emil now rather than later on?" suggested Lena. Emil's mother looked at her reproachfully, but said nothing. Lena tossed her head and muttered, "Well, it's all the same as far as I'm concerned. We'll just see what happens." "Emil is a very dear little boy," said his mother, very decidedly. Through the kitchen window she could see the dear little boy running about and playing with his little sister. They were both beautiful as little angels, thought Emil's mother, Emil in his striped Sunday suit, with his peaked cap on his curly hair, and Ida in a new little frock with a white sash round her tubby middle. Emil's mother smiled contentedly. Then she looked anxiously down the road and said, "Oh, I hope Anton's got the flag up by now, for our guests will be here at any moment." Everything seemed to be going all right. But fancy, how annoying! Just as Emil's father was on the point of hoisting the flag, Alfred came running from the cowshed calling, "The cow's calving! The cow's calving!" It was the cow broker, of course, the maddening creature who had to calve just when everyone was busy and on the point of raising the flag. Emil's father had to leave everything and rush off to the cowshed, but Emil and little Ida remained standing by the flagstaff. Ida leaned her head back as far as it would go and looked at the golden knob at the top of the pole. "Oh, how high up," she said. "You could see all the way to Mariannelund from up there." Emil reflected for a moment, but not for long. "We could find out," he said. "Shall I hoist you up?" Little Ida laughed. Oh, how kind Emil was, and what funny things he would always do. "Oh, yes, please, I want to see Mariannelund," said little Ida. "Well, you shall then," said Emil kindly, and he took the hook that fastened the flag and secured it firmly to Ida's sash. Then he took the hook off the cord with both hands. "Up you go," said Emil. "Ha ha!" said little Ida. And up she went, right up to the top of the flagstaff. Then Emil made the cord fast, just as his father always had, because he didn't want Ida to fall down and hurt herself. And there she hung as neatly and firmly as she could be. "Can you see Mariannelund?" shouted Emil. "No!" she shouted back. "Only Lerneberger." Only Lerneberger. Well, would you like to come down then?" "No, not yet," shouted Ida. "It's fun seeing Lerneberger too. Oh, look, here come the visitors." And come they did. The whole drive was full of traps and horses, and soon people began streaming through the gate and making their way slowly up to the house. Grand Mrs. Petrel came first. She had come all the way from Vimmerby in a carriage, so as to have some of Mrs. Svensson's sausage. She was very smart, with feathers in her hat, and she stuck out back and front. Mrs. Petrel looked about her in delight. Cathold was looking so beautiful in the sunshine. Among the apple trees and lilac, everything was so welcoming, yes, and the flag was flying. She saw that although she was a trifle near-sighted. The flag? Suddenly Mrs. Petrel stood still in astonishment. What on earth had gotten into the folk at Cathold? Emil's father was just coming from the cowshed, and Mrs. Petrel called out to him, "My dear Anton, what is the meaning of this? Why are you flying the Danish colours?" Emil was standing close by. He didn't know what was meant by the Danish colours. He had no idea what it meant, the red and white flag of Denmark, where the Danish people live, but he did know that the red and white at the top of the flagstaff weren't the Danish colours. said Emil. "Oh, that's only little Ida." And little Ida laughed from where she was dangling. "It's only me," she cried. "I can see you right over Lönneberger." But Emil's father didn't laugh. He brought little Ida down as fast as he possibly could, and she said, "I haven't had such fun since Emil dyed me red." She meant the time, of course, that Emil had dipped her in a big basin of whortleberry juice when they were playing Indians, so that she could be red all over, just as red Indians are. Yes, Emil saw to it that Ida should enjoy herself. But he had gotten no thanks for that. Quite on the contrary, his father grasped him firmly by the arm and shook him. "What did I say?" said Lena, when she saw Emil's father taking him off to the tool shed. That was where he used to go after getting up to mischief. Emil screamed and cried, But she just wanted to see Maria Lund," he sobbed. He thought his father was very unjust indeed. Nobody had ever told him he mustn't show little Ida Mariannelund. And it wasn't his fault that she couldn't see more than Lönneberger. Emil went on crying, but only until his father had locked the door and gone away, and then he stopped. Actually, it was really quite pleasant in the tool shed. There were so many bits of wood and odds and ends of boards to make things out of. Emil used to carve a funny little wooden man every time he was shut in the tool shed after getting up to mischief. He had already done 54, and it looked as if there were going to be still more. "I don't care about that stupid old party," said Emil. "Father can hoist the flag himself if he likes. I'm going to make another man, and I shall be cross and horrid all day." Emil knew he would soon be let out. He never had to wait in the tool shed for long. "Just until you have thought over this bit of mischief thoroughly, so that you don't ever do that again," his father used to say. And Emil was obliging enough seldom to indulge in the same bit of mischief twice over, but would find a new prank every time. Now he sat carving his wooden figure, thinking over his exploit with Ida. The figure was soon finished, for he had plenty of practice, and he didn't go on thinking for long. Then he wanted to get out, but they must have forgotten him while they feasted. He waited and waited, but nobody came. So he began wondering how to get himself out. Through the window, perhaps? It shouldn't prove very difficult. It was high up, of course, but it was easy to climb up the pile of boards which lay conveniently against the wall. He opened the window, meaning to jump out, but then he saw a lot of horrid nettles growing just below. It is painful jumping onto a bed of nettles. Emil had done so once before, just to see what it felt like. Now he knew he didn't want to do that again. "I'll think of a better way," he told himself. If you have ever been to a farm like Cathold, you will know what it is like and what nice little groups of houses there are. It makes you want to play hide and seek as soon as you get there. At Cathold, not only were there stables and cowsheds and pigsties and hen houses and sheepfolds, but a whole lot of other sheds and little houses besides. There was a smokehouse, where Emil's mother used to smoke her lovely sausage, and a wash house where Lena washed their dirty clothes, and there were 2 more little houses close together. In one was the wood and tool shed, and in the other the mangle and food store. Emil and Ida used to play hide and seek in the evening among the little houses, but not where the nettles were, of course. And now Emil had to remain where he was, just because so many nettles were growing between the tool shed and the food store. He thought hard. He saw that the window of the food store was open, and he had a bright idea. It ought to be a simple matter to put a plank between the window of the tool shed and the food store and climb across. He was thoroughly tired of the tool shed by now, and besides, he was growing pretty hungry. He never wasted time when he had a good idea. In a twinkling the plank was in place and Emil started crawling along it. It looked dangerous because the plank was narrow and Emil was pretty heavy. "If all goes well, Ida shall have my jumping jack, I promise," said Emil as he crawled along. The plank creaked alarmingly, and when he saw the nettles below he was scared and he started to wobble. "Oh, help!" yelled Emil, and overbalanced. He was already on the way to the nettle bed, but just managed to grip the plank with his legs and scramble back again. Phew! After that, everything went well enough and he got over into the food store. "That was easy," he said. "But anyway, Ida shall have my jumping jack. I think some other day. If it's broken by then, we'll just have to see." He gave the plank a hefty push that sent it back into the tool shed because he liked to do things properly. Then he ran to the door and tried it. It was locked. "I thought as much," he said, "but they'll come and fetch the sausage soon, and then I'll be out in a jiffy." He sniffed. There was a nice smell in that food store, for there were plenty of good things there. He looked all round. Up under the roof, smoked hams and black pudding hung in long rows, a whole line of them on a pole, for Emil's father was very fond of black pudding with bacon and white sauce. And there in the corner stood the bread chest, full of delicious loaves, beside the cutting board, with all the yellow cheeses and crocks full of freshly churned butter. Behind the table was the wooden vat full of salted pork, and next to it the big cupboard where Emil's mother had her raspberry juice and pickled cucumber and pear ginger and strawberry jam. But on the middle shelf of the cupboard were her delicious sausages. Emil liked sausages very much indeed. The party at Cutholt was now in full swing. The guests had had their coffee and lots of buns. Now they were just sitting waiting to get hungry again so as to start on the spare ribs of pork and salmagundi and sausage and all of the rest of it. Suddenly Emil's mother remembered and cried, "Oh, dear heavens! We've forgotten Emil! He's been shut up too long, that poor child!" Emil's father ran off at once to the tool shed and little Ida ran after him. "Now, Emil, you may come out," cried his father, flinging open the door. But imagine his astonishment. Emil wasn't there. "That young scamp must have gotten through the window," said Emil's father. But when he looked out and saw the nettles below all uncrushed and standing up straight, he was worried. "They haven't been disturbed or trodden on by any human foot at all events," he said. Little Ida began to cry. What had happened to Emil? Lena used to sing a dreadfully sad song about a girl who was changed into a white dove and flew up to heaven instead of staying inside the horrid barrel in which he had been nailed up. Emil had been locked up, and who could say whether he had been changed and flown out? Little Ida looked about to see if she could see any doves, but all she saw was a white hen pecking for worms by the tool shed. She cried and pointed at the hen. "Perhaps that's Emil," she said. Emil's father didn't think it was, but just for safety's sake he went into Emil's mother and asked if she had noticed that Emil could fly lately. No, she hadn't. And now there was a great commotion in Cutholt. The party had to wait. Everybody had to go out and hunt for Emil. "He must be in that tool shed," said his mother, and they all rushed there to have a more thorough search. But no Emil was in the tool shed, only 55 little wooden figurines standing on a shelf in a row. Mrs. Petrel had never seen so many and wondered who had made them. "Why, our little Emil," said his mother, beginning to cry. "He was such a dear little boy." "Oh, yes," said Lena, tossing her head. Then she added, "We'd better have a look in the food store, perhaps." That wasn't such a bad suggestion, especially coming from Lena, and off they all rushed. But no Emil was there either. Little Ida went on crying quietly without stopping, and when nobody was looking she went up to the white hen and whispered, "Don't fly up to heaven, Emil dear. I'll give you heaps of chicken food if only you'll stay here at home." But the hen wouldn't promise anything. She just clucked and went away. How those poor people in Cuthold hunted and hunted. In the woodshed, the mangling shed, and the stable, no Emil was there. In the cowshed and the pigsty, no Emil. In the sheepfold and the henhouse and the smokehouse and the washhouse, no Emil. They peered down the well. No Emil was there, which was a good thing, though by now they were all in tears. And the people who had come to the party whispered to each other, "He really was a dear little chap, not really naughty, as I always said." "He's probably fallen down the stream then," said Lena. The stream at Cuthold was swift and strong and dangerous. Small children might easily drown in it. "You know he's not allowed to go down there," said his mother sternly. Lena tossed her head. "Well, that's just why," she said. Then they all ran down to the stream. Luckily Emil wasn't there either, though they all cried harder than ever. And Emil's mother had thought it was going to be such a lovely party. Now there was nowhere else to look. "Whatever on earth shall we do?" asked his mother. "Well, we must have a bit of food now anyway," said his father, and this was a good idea, for they had become hungry during all the hunting and upset. Emil's mother began serving the food at once. She wept a little into the salmagundi as she carried it, but put it on the table together with the calves' livers and the spare ribs of pork and cheesecakes and everything else. Mrs. Petrel licked her lips. This all looked very promising, though she didn't see any sausage, which rather worried her. But just at that moment Emil's mother said, "Lena, we've forgotten the sausage. Run and fetch it." And so Lena ambled off. Everyone waited eagerly, and Mrs. Petrel nodded. "Sausage, yes," she said. "That will be very nice at this distressing time." Then Lena returned, but without any sausage. "Come with me and I'll show you something," she said. She looked rather odd, but then again she always did, so that was nothing out of the ordinary. "What do you mean by this nonsense?" asked Emil's mother sharply. Lena looked even odder and laughed quietly in a peculiar way. "Just come with me," she said again, and so they all did. Lena led the way to the storehouse, and all the time they heard her laughing strangely and quietly to herself. She opened the heavy door and stepped over the high threshold and went on to the big cupboard and opened its door with a crash and pointed to the middle shelf where Emil's mother kept her delicious sausage. But there was no sausage there now. Emil was there instead. He was asleep. There he lay, the dear little boy, asleep amongst all the sausage skin, and his mother was as delighted as if she had found a gold nugget in her cupboard. What did it matter that he had eaten all the sausage? It was 1,000 times better to find him on the shelf than 2 kilos of sausage. Emil's father thought the same. "There's Emil," said little Ida. "He isn't transformed. Well, not much anyway." To think that finding one little boy full of sausage could make so many people so happy. Now at last a jolly, splendid party really did begin at Cuthold. Emil's mother discovered a little bit of sausage that Emil hadn't managed to eat, and gave it to Mrs. Petrel to her great delight. And the others who didn't get any sausage didn't go hungry. There were calves' livers and spare ribs of pork and meatballs and soused herring and salmagundi and stews and puddings and jelly deals, as much as they could possibly eat. And to end up with, they had the most delectable curd cake with raspberry syrup and whipped cream. "This is the nicest thing in the world," said Emil. And if you have ever eaten the sort of curd cake they had in Cuthold, you will know that Emil never said a truer word. Then came evening with a beautiful sunset over Cuthold and the whole of Lönneberg and Schmaland. Emil's father hauled down the flag. Emil and little Ida stood watching. And so ended the party at Cuthold that day. Everybody went home. One trap after another rolled away. Last of all went grand Mrs. Petrel in her carriage. Emil and Ida heard the clop-clop of horses' hoofs die away down the hill. "I hope she will be nice to my little rat," said Emil. Ida turned around. "What rat?" "Well, the one I put into her handbag, Ida," said Emil. "Why did you do that?" asked little Ida. "Well, because I felt very sorry for it," said Emil. It had never seen anything except the sausage cupboard in all its life, and I thought it might at least want to see Vimmerby. Yes, I hope Mrs. Petrel will be kind to it, agreed little Ida. I'm sure she will be, said Emil. It was on the 10th of June that Emil hoisted little Ida up that flagpole and ate all that sausage. That was Sunday the 10th of June, when Emil hoisted little Ida up the Flagstaff by Astrid Lindgren. This story is an excerpt from Lindgren's original book entitled Emil in the Soup Tureen, translated from Swedish into English by Lilian Seaton. This story was read to you by Ingrid Staebe for StoryZone.